Welcome again to our series, How to Pray. My name is Avraham Apatow, and today we're speaking about the topic of holiness. And we're going to speak about this topic specifically in the context of the formula for a blessing before fulfilling a commandment. That formula says, Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzavanu. In English that means, who sanctified us through his commandments. Now, this idea of being sanctified through commandments, I think, is a very challenging concept to understand. It's difficult for two reasons. On the one hand, we don't really understand what holiness is. That's a very obscure and abstract term. And secondly, why would the state of holiness come through following these rules and laws that are given? So let's start talking about the idea of holiness. Most rabbis will explain the term holiness by appealing to the root meaning of the word, which means to separate. Now, this is certainly basic concept within the idea of holiness. A thing becomes holy because it's separated for a special purpose, for use, for example, in the temple or within the context of Jewish prayer. But if we look at the way the word is used within all the books of the Torah in the Tanakh, in the Jewish Bible, we'll see that the word has a much wider and greater variety of uses. So, for example, Kedoshim in the prophets is used to describe angels. That is, holy beings are called Kedoshim. But if we look at the way that word is used within the Jewish Bible, within all the books of the Tanakh, we'll see that holy or Kodesh has a great wide variety of uses. So, for example, Kedoshim, holy beings, is one of the way that angels are described. We also say God is great in his holiness, in his awesomeness and his power. So holiness has the sense of the spiritual, of tremendous power. So in order to really get to the depth and have a very clear meaning of what holiness is, we have to see how all these different uses can fit together. Now, if we look at that cosmological picture that we've been discussing, that'll help us a great deal. In that picture, there are three levels of the cosmos: the earthly level, the heavenly intermediary level, and then the divine level that surrounds the cosmos. We can see, therefore, that to be separate, to be holy, means to be separated from that earthly level. So as we ascend in the cosmos, both geographically and spiritually, we also make a similar ascent in holiness. For as we described in this ancient picture, the very planets and stars are described as having souls and spiritual power. So the whole system of angels in this picture is the very system that governs the natural world from the higher levels. That force from God is directed through angels, through different heavenly bodies, and that force and power and spiritual guidance directs all the patterns and movements of nature below. So we can see that in this picture, the idea of holiness is very connected to law, because the earthly world is governed by law. All the patterns of life, the patterns of nature, the cycles of the season, these are all determined by powers of nature. And those cycles determine health and sickness, birth and death, plenty and poverty. They were in the foundation of the ancient world, of course, was farming. So all of life was dependent upon these cycles. And ancient people were very aware that nature was governed by law. They had a very advanced mathematics, a very advanced form of astronomy, because that was necessary for their survival. But they connected that scientific mathematical picture with a spiritual picture, because they saw that the movements of the planets and the stars were very influential on their earthly life, on the issues of success and failure in agriculture. They also had a much deeper spiritual sensitivity to be aware that forces of life and the influence of the powers of above weren't just an objective, cold, natural phenomena. They were part of the handiwork of the divine. Now, if we look at this picture of the cosmos and all the beings that live within it on the earthly plane, we'll notice a very interesting phenomena. All the weather patterns of physical nature, the life of plants, the life of animals, the way physical objects interact, they're all governed by law. And they can't go against those laws. However, there's one aspect of nature that can violate law, and that's a human being. Although a human being's body is subject to law, through his choices, a human being can choose to do evil. And that's a violation of the foundation of the entire cosmos. The very essence of God is goodness, and he directs his world through his power of beneficence and kindness. And he established the world to be a moral place. However, when a human being goes against that law of God, that first law of God, he's using his own freedom to go against the very foundation and law of the cosmos, the first law of creation. And most often the reason for that violation is because man is being subject to lower forces of his physical body. So although he thinks he's being free, he has a desire to acquire something, for example, but he doesn't have the material means to do it, doesn't have the money to purchase something according to laws of transactions, but he decides to steal it or even to kill to acquire it. Well, what is driving that choice, or that apparent choice? What's driving that choice is that intense desire from his physical body to acquire that object of his desire. So it's one of the paradoxes of our life that most people believe that freedom is the power to choose what you want, but most of their choices are really determined by forces beyond them. And that really is clearly evident in the world of advertising. Everyone wants to be free to choose to get what they want, but they're being bombarded and subjected to so many influences that how can they really be free? So with this background, we can really begin to appreciate what it means to become holy. We can see, therefore, that to be holy is to use one's power of freedom to attach to higher law. Because basically we're set in the middle of the universe with a choice, either to be drawn down by these material forces and influences, or to use our freedom to reject the lower and attach ourselves to the higher. And what does it mean to attach ourselves to the higher? It means to come more closely to the very forces in the spiritual world that govern and rule the earthly world. And that world of the angels and the spiritual, as we described, is a world of law. The earthly world is governed through law. So the way to ascend out of the earthly consciousness is to be more closely attached and guided by higher law. So with this description, I think the very blessed thing that we say before fulfilling a commandment becomes very clear. God sanctifies us through his commandments, and that means that he is giving us the opportunity to choose to follow his law. And by making that choice, we are then taking advantage of the opportunity to become sanctified, to become more holy, and to participate in a higher level of being and consciousness, a consciousness and a power that is able to rule the lower forces of the natural world instead of being ruled by them. And then in this way, our entire lives can be in harmony with the very purpose and vision of God in creation.